A single crack of wood against flesh shattered the illusion of a perfect marriage. In a mansion filled with hollow luxuries, a pregnant Aria collapsed, betrayed by the man who vowed to protect her. He wasn't just a husband. He was a monster, molded by a venomous mistress. But what he didn't know was that the blood trickling down his wife's arm was the same blood that ran through the veins of the three most powerful men in the city. They were titans of industry, ruthless in the boardroom and fiercely protective of their own. And they were about to bring his entire world crashing down. Aria Davenport believed she was living a fairy tale. On the surface, her life with Ethan Davenport was the envy of their affluent circle in the sun-drenched hills of Northern California. Their sprawling estate, a monument of glass and white stone, overlooked the glittering city below. Ethan, with his charismatic smile and custom-tailored suits, was a rising star in real estate development, a man whose ambition was matched only by his charm. Aria, graceful and kind, was the perfect wife, her gentle nature a calming counterpoint to his intense energy. Their wedding had been a lavish affair, featured in society magazines. Aria's three older brothers, Harrison, Maxwell, and Gideon Thorne, had walked her down the aisle, their formidable presence a silent testament to their love for their youngest sister. They were the Thorne brothers, a name that commanded respect, and a healthy dose of fear in the worlds of technology, finance, and media. To them, Aria was simply Amy, the bright light of their family, the one they had sworn to protect after their parents' untimely death years ago. But 6 years into the marriage, the gilding on Aria's cage had begun to flake, revealing the cold, hard bars beneath. Ethan's charm was a performance, reserved for an audience. Behind closed doors, it was replaced by a chilling control. It started subtly. A critical comment about her dress, a dismissive wave of his hand when she shared an opinion, an insistence on knowing her whereabouts at all times. He slowly, methodically, severed her ties to the outside world. Her friends were deemed bad influences. Her passion for painting was a frivolous waste of time. Her calls with her brothers became shorter, more strained. Ethan was always there, hovering, his arm draped possessively around her shoulders. "Say hi to the Titans for me," he'd murmur, his voice a low threat in her ear. She'd force a smile, tell her brothers everything was wonderful, and hang up with a heart full of lies. How could she explain the suffocating loneliness? How could she tell the three most powerful men she knew that she was terrified of her own husband? They saw Ethan as the man who cherished her. She saw him as the man who was slowly erasing her. The discovery of her pregnancy should have been a joyous occasion. For a fleeting moment, it was. She saw a flicker of the old Ethan, the man she'd fallen in love with. He'd held her, his eyes shining with what she mistook for happiness. But that light soon dimmed, replaced by a new, more sinister form of control. Her condition became his weapon. "You need to rest, Aria. The stress isn't good for the baby," he'd say, confiscating her phone. "I'll handle everything. You just focus on staying healthy for my son," he'd insist, cancelling her lunch plans with a former colleague. He was isolating her not just for his own peace of mind, but for the sake of his heir. The baby wasn't theirs. It was his. The nights grew longer. Ethan started staying out late, his excuses becoming flimsier with each passing week. The scent of an unfamiliar, expensive perfume clung to his clothes, a fragrance too cloying and sweet to be Aria's. When she gently questioned him, his temper, once a distant rumble of thunder, became a storm directly overhead. "Are you accusing me of something?" he'd snarl, his handsome face contorting into an ugly mask. "After everything I provide for you, you live in this house, you wear these clothes, all because of me. A little gratitude would be nice. Fear became Aria's constant companion. It was a cold knot in her stomach that tightened every time she heard his car in the driveway. She started making herself small, unobtrusive, trying to navigate her own home like a ghost. She was 4 months pregnant, her body changing, her spirit withering. She'd catch her reflection in the polished marble floors and see a stranger looking back at her, a pale, haunted woman with fear-filled eyes. The fairy tale was over. She was trapped in a beautiful prison, and the warden was the man she had once promised to love forever. The serpent in Aria's paradise had a name, Seraphina Dubois. She was everything Aria was not, sharp, calculating, and dripping with a predatory ambition that she wore like expensive jewelry. A senior associate at a rival development firm, Seraphina had set her sights on Ethan from the moment she met him at a charity gala. She didn't see a married man. She saw an asset, a stepping stone to the life of effortless wealth and power she craved. Their affair was not a passionate, stolen romance. It was a calculated business transaction, disguised in silk sheets and champagne. Seraphina played on Ethan's deepest insecurities, his desperate need for validation, his fear of being overshadowed by his wife's powerful family. She made him feel like a king, a conqueror, something his gentle wife, in her quiet strength, never could. "She doesn't appreciate you, Ethan," Seraphina would whisper, her red lacquered nails tracing the lapel of his suit. "You're a lion, but you live with a lamb. The Thorne brothers. They look at you and see the boy who married their little sister, not the man you are." Her words were poison, seeping into the cracks in Ethan's ego. He began to see Aria not as his wife, but as a symbol of his inadequacy, a constant, silent reminder of the Thorne empire he could never truly be a part of. The pregnancy only made it worse. Seraphina twisted it into another weakness. "A baby?" she scoffed one evening in her sleek, minimalist apartment. "How quaint. She's tying you down, Ethan, trapping you in this domestic little life while you should be out building empires. You'll be beholden to her and her brothers forever." The final venomous push came on a cool Tuesday evening. Ethan had just lost a major bidding war for a downtown waterfront property, a deal Seraphina's firm had cleverly snatched from under him. He came home simmering with rage, the loss a public humiliation. He found Aria in the sunroom, sketching in her notebook, a rare moment of peace for her. He had been on the phone with Seraphina moments before, his defeat raw. "It's her fault," Seraphina had hissed. "She makes you soft. Her weakness is contagious. You let her walk all over you. A man needs to be in control of his own house. Show her who's in charge. Show her what happens when she disrespects you." The poison had found its mark. He stormed into the sunroom, his face dark. "What are you doing? I told you to rest." Aria looked up, startled by the venom in his tone. "I'm just sketching, Ethan. It helps me relax." "Relax?" He snatched the notebook from her hands, tearing the page out. "While I'm out there fighting to build a life for us, you're in here doodling? My entire day was a disaster, and you don't even care." "Of course I care," Aria said softly, standing up, her hand instinctively going to her belly. "What happened? Don't patronize me," he spat. He was pacing now, a caged animal. "You and your perfect brothers. You think you're better than me, don't you? The poor little orphan girl, rescued by her rich husband." The words were a slap in the face. "That's not fair, Ethan." "Fair?" He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Seraphina was right. You've made me weak." The name hung in the air between them, a confirmation of every fear Aria had harbored for months. Her heart sank. "Seraphina?" Seeing the pained recognition in her eyes, Ethan's rage boiled over. He felt exposed, his pathetic affair laid bare. He needed to reassert his dominance, to follow Seraphina's cruel directive. His eyes scanned the room and landed on a decorative walking cane propped against a large potted fig tree, an antique piece left by the previous owner. He grabbed it. The polished wood felt heavy and solid in his hand. "Ethan, what are you doing?" Aria's voice trembled as she backed away, her hands held up defensively. "I'm taking control of my house," he snarled, his eyes wild. He advanced on her, the cane held like a weapon. "You're going to learn to respect me." He swung. The sound was sickening, a sharp crack as the wood connected with her forearm, which she had raised to protect her face. Pain, white-hot and blinding, shot up her arm. She cried out, stumbling backward, tripping over an ottoman. She landed hard on the floor, the impact jarring her entire body. Through a haze of tears and agony, she looked up at her husband. He stood over her, the cane raised again, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. The fairy tale had just ended in the most brutal way imaginable. For a long moment, Aria lay on the floor, the shock a merciful anesthetic against the throbbing pain in her arm. The world had narrowed to the terrifying image of her husband standing over her, the antique cane in his hand, his chest heaving. The man she loved was gone. In his place was a monster. It was the flicker of movement in her peripheral vision that broke the spell. Ethan lowered the cane, his rage momentarily replaced by a flicker of panic. He had crossed a line, and the realization dawned on his face. He hadn't just intimidated her, he had physically assaulted his pregnant wife. "Aria, he stammered, taking a step back. "You made me. I didn't mean—" But his pathetic attempt at an apology was drowned out by a new, primal instinct surging through Aria. Survival. Not just for herself, but for the tiny, innocent life she was carrying. That thought was a jolt of ice water, clearing her head. She had to get out. Now. Scrambling backward, she crab-walked away from him, ignoring the fiery agony in her arm. "Stay away from me," she whispered, her voice hoarse with terror. She pushed herself to her feet, using a large armchair for support. Her left arm was already swelling, a dark bruise beginning to blossom on her skin. She cradled it against her body, her eyes never leaving Ethan. He was still sputtering, trying to piece together an excuse, but she wasn't listening. She saw the open French doors leading to the garden path. It was her only way out. Without a second thought, she bolted. The cool night air was a shock to her system. Adrenaline surged, dulling the pain just enough for her to run. She fled down the manicured stone path, her bare feet slipping on the dew-kissed grass. She didn't dare look back. She could hear him shouting her name, a mixture of anger and feigned concern. But it only fueled her flight. Their estate was vast, surrounded by a high wall. The main gate was her only hope. It was a quarter-mile run down the winding driveway. Every jarring step sent a fresh wave of pain through her arm, and a sharp cramp was beginning to form in her side. But she couldn't stop. The thought of her baby, vulnerable and dependent on her, propelled her forward. She reached the massive wrought-iron gates. They were, of course, closed, operated by a remote in the house or a code on the keypad. She fumbled with the keypad, her fingers shaking uncontrollably. Her mind went blank. What was the code? Ethan had changed it last week after firing a gardener. He'd told her the new one, but her brain, flooded with terror, refused to recall it. Headlights swept across the driveway. Ethan was coming after her in his car. Panic seized her. There was a small, rarely used pedestrian gate set into the stone wall about 50 yards away. It was her only chance. She darted into the shadows of the tall cypress trees, lining the drive, her breath coming in ragged sobs. The pedestrian gate was stiff, operated by a heavy, old-fashioned latch. She threw her body weight against it, crying out as the movement jostled her broken arm. The latch groaned, then gave way with a loud click. She slipped through the opening and ran, not knowing where she was going, only that she had to get away. She was on a dark, winding canyon road with no sidewalks. Cars sped past, their occupants oblivious to the desperate, pregnant woman stumbling in the darkness. She had no phone, no purse, no shoes, just the thin silk dress she was wearing and the all-consuming need to find safety. After what felt like an eternity, she saw the distant glow of a 24-hour gas station. It was an oasis of light in the terrifying darkness. Leaning against the cold brick of the building, she finally allowed herself to break down, the sobs racking her exhausted body. An elderly clerk, a kind-faced man named George, saw her through the window and rushed out. "Miss, are you all right? My God, your arm!" "Please," Aria choked out. "I need to use a phone. It's an emergency." Inside, George handed her the landline. Her hands were still trembling so violently she could barely dial. She knew she couldn't call 911. Ethan was a master manipulator. He would twist the story, paint her as hysterical, and the police in their wealthy enclave were all too familiar with his generous donations to the policeman's ball. She needed someone who wouldn't just listen, but who had the power to burn Ethan's world to the ground. She dialed the one number she knew by heart, a number she hadn't called directly in years. It was the private line to her oldest brother, Harrison Thorne. It rang once, twice. She prayed he would answer. "This is Harrison," a deep, calm voice said on the other end. Tears streamed down Aria's face, a wave of relief washing over her. "Harry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It's Amy. I need help. Please. You have to help me." Harrison Thorne was in his penthouse office, a glass-walled sanctuary overlooking the city he had in many ways conquered. As the CEO of Thorne Dynamics, a global tech behemoth, his life was a meticulously scheduled symphony of board meetings, data analysis, and innovation. He was a man of logic and control, known for his unnerving calm in the face of billion-dollar crises. But the broken, terrified whisper of his sister's voice on the phone shattered that calm in an instant. "Amy, where are you?" "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice sharp with immediate concern. He was already on his feet, swiping his tablet to life, his mind racing through protocols. "I'm at a gas station. I don't know where," she sobbed. "Ethan. He hurt me, Harry. He hit me with a cane. My arm. I think it's broken." The words hit Harrison like a physical blow. A cold, lethal fury, unlike anything he had ever felt, washed over him. It was a glacial rage, silent and absolute. He kept his voice steady for her, a rock in her storm. "Okay, Amy, stay right there. Give the phone to the clerk. I'm tracking your location right now. I'll have someone there in 5 minutes. Don't move. Do you understand?" After getting the address from the clerk and assuring him that help was on the way, Harrison ended the call. For a moment, he stood perfectly still in the silent office, the city lights twinkling below like a distant, indifferent galaxy. The mask of the calm CEO fell away, replaced by the fury of a protective older brother. He had failed. They had all failed. They had let a monster into their family and given him their most precious treasure. He made 2 calls. The first was to his head of security, a former Special Forces commander named Marcus Cole. "Marcus," Harrison's voice was dangerously quiet. "Aria is at this address. She's injured. Get her. Use the company's private medical team, not a public hospital. No police, no records. Take her to the Willow Creek safe house. And Marcus, Find out everything you can about a gas station clerk named George. He helped her. See that he's rewarded beyond his wildest dreams." The second and third calls were to his brothers. Maxwell Thorne, the middle brother, was the shark of Wall Street, CEO of Thorne Capital. He was ruthless, aggressive, and lived by the mantra that money was power. He answered on the first ring. "Max," Harrison said, dispensing with pleasantries. "It's Aria. Ethan put her in the hospital." The silence on the other end was heavy, charged. Maxwell, who once famously bankrupted a rival firm over a minor slight, adored his sister. "Where is she?" he finally asked, his voice a low growl. "Marcus is getting her. She's going to Willow Creek," Harrison replied. "I need you to start digging. I want to know everything about Ethan Davenport's finances. Every asset, every debt, every secret partner, every dirty dollar. I want to ruin him." "Ruin him?" Maxwell's laugh was devoid of humor. "Harry, by the time I'm done, he'll wish ruin was all he had to worry about." Gideon Thorne, the youngest of the brothers, ran Thorne Media Group, a sprawling empire of news networks, magazines, and digital platforms. He was the storyteller, the shaper of public opinion. He was in the middle of a live broadcast interview when his private phone buzzed with Harrison's name. He excused himself immediately. Harrison repeated the devastating news. Gideon's reaction was different. It wasn't the cold fury of Harrison or the hot rage of Maxwell. It was the calculated anger of a man who understood that a person's life could be destroyed with a single, well-placed story. "The public face," Gideon said, his mind already working. "Ethan Davenport, the philanthropist, the loving husband. We need to tear it down. I'll get my best investigative team on it. We'll expose every lie, every skeleton. He'll be a pariah." "Good," Harrison said. "Meet me at Willow Creek as soon as you can. We need to see her." He hung up and stared out at the city again. The symphony of his life had been replaced by the drums of war. Ethan Davenport had made the gravest mistake of his life. He hadn't just harmed a defenseless pregnant woman. He had declared war on the Thorne brothers. And the Thornes did not lose wars. Their revenge would not be loud or explosive. It would be systematic, silent, and utterly devastating. They would dismantle his life, piece by piece, until nothing was left but dust. While Aria was being treated by a team of private doctors in the secure, tranquil sanctuary of the Thorne family's Willow Creek estate, the gears of her brother's revenge began to turn with terrifying efficiency. It was a three-pronged assault, each brother wielding his unique power like a finely honed weapon. Maxwell Thorne struck first, from the gleaming towers of Wall Street. Within hours of Harrison's call, he had assembled his sharks, a team of forensic accountants and ruthless financial analysts who operated in the murky depths of corporate finance. Ethan Davenport thought his financial dealings were clever. To Maxwell's team, they were child's play. They started with Ethan's company, Davenport Developments. They discovered he was leveraged to the hilt, his portfolio a house of cards built on risky loans and inflated property values. Maxwell made a few discreet calls to the heads of the banks holding Ethan's debt. He didn't make threats. He simply laid out the unvarnished facts, presenting analysis that showed the inevitable collapse of Davenport's ventures. He suggested that a prudent institution might want to call in its loans immediately. Panic spread through Ethan's creditors like a virus. Simultaneously, Maxwell's team uncovered a web of shell corporations Ethan used to hide assets and evade taxes. They found a secret offshore account in the Cayman Islands, co-owned by none other than Serafina Dubois. It was a slush fund, filled with money skimmed from construction projects and investor funds. Maxwell packaged the information anonymously and sent it directly to the desk of the most dogged and ambitious prosecutor at the IRS's Criminal Investigation Division. An untouchable, sealed federal investigation was launched overnight. By the end of the first 48 hours, Ethan's financial world was in a state of free fall. His credit lines were frozen. His lenders were demanding immediate repayment. His assets were locked pending a federal inquiry. He was hemorrhaging money, his empire crumbling before his eyes, and he had no idea where the attack was coming from. While Maxwell bled him dry, Gideon Thorne began to dismantle his reputation. As the head of TMG, Gideon controlled the narrative. He didn't want a splashy, scandalous headline right away. That was too crude. His approach was more insidious, like a slow-acting poison. He assigned his top investigative journalist, a Pulitzer Prize winner named Roland Finch, to the Aria Davenport project. Roland and his team started with the seemingly innocuous. They interviewed former employees of Davenport Developments. Stories began to emerge of unpaid contractors, unsafe working conditions, and verbal abuse. They spoke to people from Ethan's past, old university acquaintances, and former colleagues, who painted a picture of a man driven by jealousy and a deep-seated inferiority complex. Gideon then moved on to Serafina Dubois. Her digital footprint was scrubbed, her social media locked down, but it was too late. Gideon's team had already archived everything. They discovered she was a ruthless corporate climber with a history of seducing powerful men to get ahead. They found a jilted ex-fiancé who was more than happy to talk, on the record, about her manipulative and cruel nature. Gideon started by leaking small, unattributed stories to financial blogs and local news outlets. Whispers of trouble at Davenport Developments. Prominent developer under financial strain. He was building a foundation of public doubt. The grand, character-assassinating exposé would come later, when Ethan was at his most vulnerable. Meanwhile, Harrison Thorne orchestrated the entire operation from his tech fortress. His role was to gather the irrefutable proof of what Ethan had done to Aria. Marcus Cole, his head of security, had quietly retrieved the security footage from the gas station, which clearly showed Aria's distressed state and injured arm. He also visited the Davenport estate. Posing as a technician from the security company, he accessed the internal server. Ethan, in his arrogance, had never thought to delete the footage. Harrison now had a high-definition video of the entire brutal attack in the sunroom. But Harrison went deeper. He used his company's cutting-edge surveillance technology to access phone records. He now had transcripts of every call and text between Ethan and Serafina, including the call just moments before the assault, where Serafina explicitly told Ethan to show her who's in charge. It was a prosecutor's dream, motive, conspiracy, and execution all tied up in a neat digital package. The brothers worked in perfect, terrifying sync, their actions a silent, coordinated storm. Ethan Davenport was being attacked on all fronts. His money was vanishing, his name was being tarnished, and the evidence that could send him to prison was being compiled by a man who could hack into a satellite if he wanted to. Ethan felt the world closing in, but he was looking for the enemy in the wrong places. He blamed his business rivals, jealous competitors, anyone but the three quiet, determined men who were systematically taking his entire life apart. A week after the attack, Ethan Davenport was a man on the verge of collapse. His business was a smoldering ruin. Banks were foreclosing on his properties, investors were suing him for fraud, and the IRS had slapped a lien on every known asset he possessed. His name, once a symbol of success in the city's real estate scene, was now associated with failure and financial instability. He was toxic. He desperately tried to cling to the one person he thought was his ally, Serafina. But she was growing distant, her calls less frequent. She saw a sinking ship and was already planning her escape. Ethan's desperation morphed into a dangerous delusion. He convinced himself that this was all a test, a temporary setback. The key to his salvation, he believed, was Aria. If he could just get her back, get her to talk to her brothers, they could make all of this go away. He had no idea they were the architects of his demise. He still believed they saw him as family. He managed to get a message to Aria through a lawyer, pleading for a meeting. "I just want to talk," the message said. "To apologize. To fix this." At the Willow Creek estate, Aria, still healing but now safe and resolute, read the message with her brothers by her side. "He doesn't want to apologize," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in years. "He wants to use me." "We know," Harrison said, his hand resting reassuringly on her shoulder. "And we're going to let him try." The trap was set. The meeting was agreed upon, but the location was non-negotiable. It would be at a neutral site, one of Gideon's properties, an empty television studio on the outskirts of the city. It was a place they could completely control. Ethan, buoyed by this small victory, felt a surge of his old arrogance. He immediately called Serafina, who reluctantly agreed to come with him. She saw it as a final, desperate play. Maybe the Thorne money could still be a lifeline. On the appointed evening, Ethan and Serafina walked into Studio 7. It was a vast, cavernous space, dark except for a single pool of light in the center, where 4 chairs were arranged. As they approached, the heavy studio doors slid shut behind them with an ominous, echoing boom. They were locked in. Aria was already there, seated, looking composed and powerful. She was no longer the timid, frightened woman Ethan remembered. The fear in her eyes had been replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Standing behind her, like sentinels, were her 3 brothers. Harrison, calm and analytical. Maxwell, radiating barely concealed aggression. Gideon, his expression a mask of detached observation. The sight of the 3 Thorne brothers, standing united, finally pierced Ethan's delusion. A knot of pure dread tightened in his stomach. This wasn't a reconciliation. It was an execution. "Aria, thank God," Ethan began, his voice slick with false sincerity as he rushed forward. "I've been so worried. Sit down, Ethan," Harrison commanded. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the silence of the studio with absolute authority, stopping Ethan in his tracks. Serafina, her instinct screaming, hung back. She looked from the brothers to Aria, her perfectly made-up face a mask of dawning horror. She finally understood. They had been played. Ethan and Serafina slowly, nervously, took the seats opposite Aria. The air was thick with tension. The bright studio lights beat down on them, making them feel exposed, interrogated. "You wanted to talk," Gideon said, his voice smooth as silk. "So talk." Ethan swallowed hard, his eyes darting between the brothers. "Look, there's been a misunderstanding. My business, it's all falling apart. I think someone is targeting me. I was hoping you could help." Maxwell let out a short, brutal laugh. "Help?" he sneered. "Let me tell you about your business, Ethan. It's not falling apart. It's been systematically dismantled. By me." Ethan's face went white. He turned to Serafina, who looked as if she was about to faint. "And your reputation?" Gideon added, taking a step forward. "All those nasty little rumors, the stories of your incompetence and cruelty. That was my team. We have a feature-length documentary ready to air. We're calling it The Predator of Pacific Heights." Ethan stared at them, his mind refusing to process the information. He turned his desperate gaze to Aria. "Amy, please, tell them I love you. It was a mistake." It was then that Aria spoke, her voice clear and unwavering, ringing with a strength Ethan had never heard before. "Was it a mistake, Ethan?" she asked, her eyes locking onto his. "Tell me, which part was the mistake?" The trap was sprung. There was no escape. They were not in a television studio. They were in a courtroom, and the judges, jury, and executioners were the family he had so foolishly betrayed. The harsh studio lights seemed to suck all the air out of the room. Ethan stared at Aria, his mouth opening and closing like a fish, but no sound came out. The calm, powerful woman before him was a stranger. "Which part was the mistake, Ethan?" Aria repeated, her voice cutting through his shock. "Was it the mistake of seeing me as your property? Or the mistake of believing my brothers would let you get away with it?" She leaned forward slightly. "Or was it the simple mistake of picking up that cane?" As if on cue, a massive screen behind the brothers flickered to life. It displayed the security footage from the sunroom, crisp and undeniable. The silence in the studio was broken by the sound of Aria's frightened voice, followed by the sickening crack of the cane hitting her arm. Serafina gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Ethan flinched as if he'd been struck again. He couldn't watch, but he couldn't look away either. The screen showed his face, twisted in a mask of rage as he stood over his fallen, pregnant wife. "We have it from 3 different angles," Harrison stated calmly, his tone making the words even more chilling. "And we have your phone records, all of them." The screen changed, now displaying transcripts of text messages. Serafina's words appeared in stark black and white. "She makes you soft. Show her who's in charge." Serafina began to tremble. That's out of context. I never meant—" "Oh, I think you meant it," Gideon interjected, his eyes cold. "You conspired to incite violence against a pregnant woman. I wonder how that will play with the public, or more importantly, with a jury." Ethan finally found his voice, a pathetic, pleading whine. "Aria, please, don't do this. Think of the baby. Our baby." "I am thinking of the baby," Aria shot back, standing up. The fire in her eyes was blazing. "I'm thinking about the kind of world I want to bring my child into, and it's not a world where a man like you has any part in it. It's not our baby, Ethan. It's my baby. You lost the right to call him yours the moment you chose her over us." She took a step toward him, and for the first time, he shrank back from her. "You thought I was weak," she said, her voice filled with all the pain and fury she had suppressed for years. "You thought because I was quiet, I had no strength. You thought my brother's power was something you could borrow, something you could use. You were wrong. Their power is my protection. My strength is my own." She turned to Serafina, who was now openly weeping. "And you," Aria said with chilling disdain. "You wanted my life. You wanted the money, the house, the status. You can have it. You can have the man who beats his pregnant wife. You can have the bankrupt company and the IRS investigation. You two deserve each other." With that, Aria turned her back on them, a final, powerful dismissal. She walked back to her brothers, and Maxwell put a protective arm around her. Harrison stepped forward, holding a small tablet. "Here are your options," he said to Ethan and Serafina, his voice devoid of any emotion. "Option A. You sign these papers. They are a full confession, a divorce settlement that leaves you with nothing, and a restraining order that prevents you from ever coming within 500 feet of my sister or her child again. You will then be escorted from this building, and you will disappear. We will hold this evidence, and if you ever so much as breathe in Aria's direction, we will release it, and you will spend the next 20 years in prison." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "Option B," he continued, "is that you refuse to sign. In which case, Detectives Miller and Chen are waiting just outside that door. The footage has already been sent to the district attorney's office. A warrant has been issued. You will be arrested for aggravated assault, conspiracy, and a host of financial crimes that will keep you in court for the rest of your miserable life." He placed the tablet on the table in front of them. "You have 60 seconds to decide." The choice was no choice at all. It was annihilation or oblivion. Ethan, his face ashen, looked at Seraphina, but she wouldn't meet his gaze. She was already lost in her own personal hell. With a hand that shook so badly he could barely hold the stylus, Ethan signed. Seraphina followed suit, her signature a messy scrawl through her tears. Justice wasn't about a dramatic courtroom showdown. It was about this, the quiet, complete, and utter surrender of two cruel people who had underestimated the fierce loyalty of family and the quiet strength of a woman they tried to break. When Ethan and Seraphina finished signing, the heavy studio doors slid open. Two of Marcus Cole's security men, dressed in severe black suits, stepped inside. They didn't speak. They simply gestured for the disgraced pair to leave. Ethan stumbled out into the night, a man who had lost everything in the space of an hour. The life he had so carefully constructed was gone. The fortune, the reputation, the wife he had taken for granted, all erased. He turned to Seraphina, perhaps expecting some shred of comfort, but she looked at him with pure, undiluted hatred. "This is your fault," she hissed, her voice venomous. "You were weak. You ruined me." She turned and walked away without a backward glance, disappearing into the darkness, leaving him utterly alone. The consequences were swift and merciless. As promised, the brothers did not release the footage. They didn't need to. The financial and social ruin they had engineered was punishment enough. Ethan Davenport became a ghost. His name was scrubbed from company letterheads and charity plaques. Friends and associates stopped returning his calls. He was forced to sell what little he had left to pay his legal fees for the ongoing federal investigation. He ended up in a small, run-down apartment on the other side of the country, a bitter, broken man, haunted by the life he had destroyed. Seraphina faced her own reckoning. Gideon's team quietly leaked the story of her affair and her role in inciting Ethan to several high-profile industry publications. She was fired from her job, the morals clause in her contract invoked. Blacklisted from every major firm in the country, her career was over. The life of luxury she had schemed and manipulated for had vanished, leaving her with nothing but shame and infamy. Months later, in the warm, sunlit rooms of the Willow Creek estate, Aria gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Noah, signifying a new beginning. Her brothers were there, their formidable presence softened by the tiny baby in their arms. Harrison, the tech genius, cooed at his nephew. Maxwell, the ruthless financier, was uncharacteristically gentle, letting the baby's tiny fingers wrap around his own. Gideon, the media mogul, simply watched his sister, his eyes filled with pride and love. The trauma of what Ethan had done would always be a part of Aria's story, but it no longer defined her. She had rediscovered her strength, not just through her brother's power, but from within herself. She began painting again, her art infused with a new depth and emotion. Her quiet resilience had blossomed into a fierce, protective love for her son. One afternoon, as she sat in the garden, sketching a sleeping Noah, Harrison came and sat beside her. "He's perfect, Amy," he said softly. "He is," she agreed, a gentle smile on her face. "Thank you, Harry, for everything. We'll always be here for you," he promised. He'll never have to worry about anything. Aria looked from her brother's strong, kind face to her beautiful, peaceful son. The gilded cage was a distant memory. The monster was gone. Here, surrounded by unconditional love and unwavering loyalty, she was not just safe, she was free. The storm had passed, and in its wake was the bright, promising dawn of a new life, a life she would build on her own terms, for herself and for her son. 5 years later, the echo of the storm had long since faded, replaced by the warm, brilliant light of a life rebuilt. Aria no longer lived in the shadow of fear, but in a sun-drenched home of her own design, nestled in a quiet, coastal town. The sterile white marble of her former prison was a distant memory, replaced by warm woods, colourful rugs, and walls filled with her own vibrant canvases. Aria Thorne, as she was now known, had become a celebrated artist. The pain of her past, once a source of silent suffering, had been channeled into her work, creating pieces that were both raw with emotion and breathtakingly beautiful. Critics lauded her use of colour and her ability to capture the complex interplay of shadow and light, seeing in her work a powerful narrative of survival and rebirth. Her first solo exhibition had sold out in a single night. She wasn't just a survivor, she was a creator, a storyteller with a brush. Her greatest creation, however, was playing on the floor of her studio. Noah was a bright, happy 5-year-old with his mother's kind eyes and an infectious laugh that filled every corner of their home. He knew nothing of the darkness that had preceded his birth. His world was one of finger painting, bedtime stories, and the unwavering adoration of his mother and 3 larger-than-life uncles. To Noah, they weren't the titans of industry. They were simply Uncle Harry, who built him amazing Lego robots, Uncle Max, who taught him how to throw a baseball with surprising patience, and Uncle Gid, who told the most fantastic, imaginative stories. They doted on him, their fierce protectiveness now channeled into spoiling their nephew and supporting their sister. They were at her house most weekends, shedding their corporate armor at the door to become part of a loud, laughing, loving family. One sunny Saturday afternoon, as Aria put the finishing touches on a new painting, she watched her brothers in the backyard with Noah. Harrison had designed a miniature drone, and he and Noah were giggling as they flew it over Maxwell's head, who was pretending to be a grumpy giant. Gideon was documenting the whole thing on his phone, a wide grin on his face. In that moment, a profound sense of peace washed over Aria. The past was not forgotten. The faint, silvery scar on her forearm was a permanent reminder, but it no longer held any power over her. It was simply a part of her story, the dark chapter that made the current bright one feel so much more precious. She had heard, through a stray legal document years ago, what had become of Ethan. He was a ghost, a non-entity, working a menial job in a different state, his name and face completely forgotten by the world he once tried to conquer. Serafina had vanished entirely, a footnote in a cautionary tale. They were spectres from another life, irrelevant to the beautiful reality she had built. "What you painting, Mummy?" Noah asked, running into the studio and wrapping his arms around her legs. Aria smiled, wiping a smudge of cobalt blue from her cheek. She pointed to the canvas. It was a portrait of 4 people, a woman and her 3 brothers, standing together against a dark, stormy background, but their faces were turned toward a brilliant, rising sun. "I'm painting a picture of my heroes," she said, pulling him into a hug. Her revenge was never about the destruction of Ethan Davenport. That was simply the removal of a threat. Her true victory was this: the sound of her son's laughter, the warmth of her brother's love, and the freedom to paint her own sunrise after a long, dark night. She had not just survived. She had flourished, creating a legacy not of pain, but of strength, love, and the unbreakable bonds of family. 2 more years passed, grounding the Thorne family in a rhythm of peaceful normalcy. Noah, now a sharp and inquisitive 7-year-old, was the undisputed center of their universe. The trauma of his origins was a story he did not know, a ghost that had long been banished by the light and laughter that filled his life. The past, however, has a way of asking questions, often in the innocent voice of a child. It happened on a quiet Tuesday evening. One of Gideon's documentaries had won a prestigious award, and the whole family was gathered at Aria's house for a celebratory dinner. Noah was sitting at the large kitchen island, diligently working on a school project. It was a My Family poster, decorated with his crayon drawings of his mum and his 3 uncles depicted as superheroes. Aria was smiling as she watched him, her heart full. When Noah looked up from his poster, his brow furrowed in concentration. He tapped an empty space on the paper. "Mom," he asked, his voice clear in the quiet room. "Every kid in my class has a dad on their poster. Where should I draw mine?" The casual question landed with the force of a physical blow. The cheerful chatter in the room ceased. Harrison, Maxwell, and Gideon all stopped what they were doing, their eyes immediately finding Aria's. For a fleeting second, the old fear, the ghost of the past, flickered in her eyes. This was the conversation she had always known was coming, the one chapter she had left unwritten. She took a deep breath, her gaze steadying. She would not lie to him, and she would not be afraid. She knelt beside her son's stool, taking his small hand in hers. "That's a very good question, sweetheart," she began, her voice soft but firm. "Family can look many different ways. Some have a mum and a dad. Some have 2 mums, or just a grandparent. Our family is special. It has a mum, a wonderful son, and 3 of the best uncles in the whole world." Noah considered this. "But did I have a dad?" he pressed, his curiosity genuine. Aria looked at her brothers, who watched her with silent, unwavering support. She then turned back to her son. "Yes, you did," she said honestly. "But he wasn't a very happy person, and he didn't know how to love us in a safe and kind way. So I had to make a very brave choice. I chose to leave, to build a new, happy life just for you and me. I chose to build this family, right here, with Uncle Harry, Uncle Max, and Uncle Gid." It was Maxwell, the toughest and most emotionally guarded of the brothers, who spoke next. He walked over and placed a hand on Noah's shoulder. "Your mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "is the strongest person I've ever met. And being a dad isn't just about biology, buddy. It's about showing up. It's about protecting the people you love. And we will always show up for you and your mum." Noah looked at the 3 powerful men he adored, and at the gentle, loving face of his mother. He looked back at his poster, at the empty space. Then, with the simple wisdom of a child who has only ever known love, he picked up a yellow crayon. He didn't draw a single man. Instead, he drew 3 more hearts, right next to the drawings of his uncles. He then crossed out the project's pre-written title, My Family, and carefully wrote his own above it. My Team. Aria pulled him into a fierce hug, tears of gratitude welling in her eyes. This was it. This was the final victory. The ghost was gone for good. The empty space on the page had not been a void, but an opportunity, a chance to show her son that a family is not defined by what it's missing, but by the love that fills it. And theirs was overflowing. That was the story of Aria Thorne, and the day her cruel husband learned the true meaning of family. Her story is a powerful reminder that judging someone by their quiet demeanor can be a devastating mistake. Behind a gentle spirit can lie the strength of a survivor, and behind that survivor can be a family whose love knows no bounds and whose justice is absolute. What Ethan and Seraphina saw as weakness was Aria's greatest strength, and their karma came in the form of 3 brothers who would move heaven and earth to protect their own. If this story of justice and unbreakable family bonds moved you, please take a moment to hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of loyalty. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories of karma and redemption. What are your thoughts on the brothers' revenge? Let us know in the comments below.